Welcome to Branding the Experience. We discuss ways how we can create environments where employees actually want to come to work and customers want to keep coming back. Brought to you by Bator Training and Consulting and Break Ice Marketing.
Here are your hosts, Ken Bator of Bator Training and Consulting and Heather Dowell of Break Ice Marketing.
You and I work or have worked mostly, and correct me if I'm wrong, with service-based businesses. While I've done some product-based businesses before, the vast majority of my experience is with service-based businesses like banks, credit unions, restaurants, and so forth.
Uh-huh.
And it's my belief that branding, can be, so much more challenging with service businesses. So, take cell phones, for instance. If somebody is a raving fan of an iPhone, they've got to get like two or three bad iPhones before the product goes so bad and they switch to a Samsung or whatever. I remember back in the day, here's a brand that people haven't thought about for a while, BlackBerry. It's probably like, the 8-track tape or whatever. You probably aren't old enough to remember that. I am.
Yes. No, I do. And pagers, I know pagers too. So I think before BlackBerry.
But I remember, I was a raving fan of BlackBerry. That was the business smartphone for a long time.
Right.
And then, I literally, their product went to crap, literally. Where I want to say at least two bad BlackBerries, maybe three that I had to turn in and say, this isn't like, the other Blackberries I've had,
Right.
before I actually eventually switched to Samsung and never went back. And now BlackBerry is dead. It's a dead brand. But I think, if you have a great product, you know, people will, give you some slack and say, well, let's try it one more time. And the product in and of itself is the brand. You could even get, well, I bought an iPhone at Best Buy and I had bad service, but hey, it's still an iPhone. That's what I really wanted.
Right.
Not
You might
saying,
go to Best Buy again, but you're going to get the iPhone.
yeah. And not trying to disparage Best Buy. I had a great experience last year in buying a new laptop, so I'm not negative on Best Buy. But when it's service related, yeah, when it's not just the food, when it's not just the checking account, when it's not just the hotel room, it's the overall experience. Yeah, that's where the brand associations and the consistency that you talk about is really important. So I want to bring up I wasn't even planning on doing this. I was looking this up on my phone when you were talking. I wasn't texting with somebody else. I was looking up something in
Yeah, I
particular.
was wondering about that,
I
Ken.
was I was paying attention to what you said, but I wanted to get this right. And I'm actually going to use their name because it's going to be mostly positive.
Okay.
Uh a few months ago, and I am a big raving fan of IHG hotels. I'm a diamond platinum, kick-ass person, whatever, up on the scale. I almost exclusively stay at IHG hotels because most of the time, I would say 95 out of 100, I have a great experience in what I'm expecting. Even Holiday Inn Express, which isn't great,
Right.
I know what I'm getting. I know
Right.
exactly what it is. Yeah, I know it's going to be a clean room. It's not going to be anything special. I know I'm going to get, powdered eggs and it's going to be, an average at best breakfast that's free, but I
Right.
know what it is. It's
Right.
not going to surprise me.
Right.
So, a couple months ago, I had some business and had an opportunity to take my wife and go to Palm Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our favorite place in Palm Springs that was like really expensive. It's a great hotel, by the way. If I remember it, I'll mention it. It's the Kimpton in Palm Springs. It's awesome.
Okay.
But we said, you know what? Why don't we stay? There's a great deal at the Riviera Resort just off of downtown Palm Springs. It's an IHG hotel. Let's go ahead and try that. And it was interesting because they were under construction. Now it's one of those like old retro type hotels.
Okay.
And it's clean, and we had outstanding service from the time we came to the door. Person came and said, "Yeah, you're checking in today. Can I help you with luggage? Can I do this, that, and the other thing?" I didn't even have him do anything, and I still tipped him because he was, so attentive to us.
Mhm.
The check-in was excellent. We spent a lot of time at the pool. The people at the bar and in the restaurant were top notch, really friendly, people that you actually wanted to talk to. Yeah,
Mhm.
and not just order stuff or get stuff, from them.
Right.
So the retro aspect was fun. The service, I would say, was an A or A plus. The experience, because they were under construction, not so much.
Right.
We found out why it was such a great deal in price. And to make what's already a long story short, it was loud. There were people coming in and out of different rooms. We understood it was under construction.
Right.
And then we had a major problem in the bathroom the last day where we were on the first floor, and they had a sewage problem, and I won't give you the details,
Yeah.
but at like
Not good.
six,
Oh, bueno.
yeah, at 6 in the morning, we had to go to grab our stuff, go to another room, and so forth. And that in and of itself, created less of a positive experience, the construction and the problems and so forth. And I remember the general manager calling me like a day or two later, hearing about the incident and saying, I'm really, and then we'll bring it back to brand associations, and then we'll
Mhm.
I want to hear your opinion on this. Is, what? It wasn't my favorite experience, but if you actually got your stuff together with the construction and everything, I would go back because your service made me feel so welcome.
Right.
And it was clean, and I like the retro feel. I mean, that's, you either like it or you don't, and it's
Uh-huh.
part of your brand. But
Right.
I told him this, the problems with the construction and the problems with the actual property, that's much easier to fix than fixing problems in your culture and with your team.
Right.
Fortunately, the latter is not your problem. And
Right.
in fact, that's the only reason I might come back to your
Because
hotel.
construction is temporary. So
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
So to bring it back to brand associations, you've got something there. You could lead with the service. You could lead when you market it. You could lead with the retro feel. You want old time Palm Springs, come to the Riviera. You've got things that you can work with. You, but you obviously have to take care of the sewage and the construction issues, because
Right.
that'll only go so long. But
Right.
the point that I'm trying to make is, one, there are things in the brand association batting order with the Riviera that you have from the nostalgia and the service that you could build
Mhm.
on. And the construction problems and so forth, those you can get rid of. And the last thing I'll say is their service and their culture was so good that they knew exactly how to handle the bad situation. We move these folks right away to another room. We don't question it, we don't play with it, we move them to another room. We
Right.
call and say, hey, we're really sorry about this and so forth. We know it's a bad situation. We've got a way of handling those bad situations to keep them from being worse. So they've got something very valuable in the whole batting order.
Mhm.
Speak to that a little bit. You
I think one of the things is acknowledgement, right? So you acknowledge and responded. I think those are two key things. You don't try to hide it, you don't try to ignore it or brush it aside, or yeah, I think that that is critical. In this case, it was a temporary thing. It was acknowledged, and you voiced your concerns, and it was addressed, or told you it was going to be addressed. I guess time will tell, right? I mean, if you go back in the year and still under construction, there's still some sewage problems. I mean, maybe maybe there's still an issue. It wasn't so temporary. But I think that's important. I think that a lot of times, brands might try to ignore because there might be area. First of all, no brand, no person, nothing is perfect. You're always going to have something. Maybe it's a review. Maybe it's a bad, Google review that came in. I know a lot of times, and I bring that up because I know a lot of times all companies like to look at the reviews coming in. If you're a restaurant, if you're a credit union, especially if you're a service company, right? And you look at the Yelp and you look at the Google reviews, and I get it. Sometimes people say, oh, fake reviews, whatever, but still it's important to review them and respond to the good and to the bad. Because so many times, I mean, I go in and if there's let's just say restaurant, especially a restaurant, if I'm new to an area and I want to go to a restaurant, I'm not familiar with the restaurants in that area, I'm going to look at the reviews. I have nothing else to go by, right? And I always, usually what I do is I look at the reviews and I sort it newest to oldest. That way, if there are any fakes, well, that's my strategy anyway. But if there are negative, don't just, discount. I mean, just, look at the 1 stars. What are they saying? And are they responded to? You kind of get, a sense of, okay, was this just a really ticked off, customer, or maybe it was a one-time thing, it was addressed. If you see it, they're being responded to, it tells you, okay, this brand cares. They're reviewing and acknowledging the reviews coming in, and they're responding, and you're hoping, it sounds like anyway, they're addressing. So I bring that up because I know a lot of times, the credit unions we work with, they're trying to get reviews coming in. So obviously those reviews are important to them, the Google reviews, Yelp reviews, but it's important to, review them yourself, read them coming in and acknowledge them coming in. If it's not a review, maybe it's a phone call that comes in, or maybe it's someone that comes into if you're a credit union, a branch, or if you're a restaurant, into your restaurant, and acknowledge, make that person know that you acknowledge, you hear them, and you're addressing whatever, and hopefully you really don't just say you are addressing, whatever that issue was. So I think that's important, is the acknowledgement and and timely response.
Yeah, so many great points there. To get back to, Yelp reviews or reviews in general, especially how critical they are with service-based businesses.
Right.
And I will give a lot of credit to my dentist. Yeah, he was actually one of my clients too. He was smart enough to not only be a great dentist, but also to hire a great consultant. What can I say?
Yes.
But so many, and I see this in the medical field, and my wife and I, my wife who's been in healthcare, we argue about this all the time, is that, what, the doctor's time isn't more important than my time. If there's a 10 o'clock appointment, 10:30 seeing me is not acceptable. I fired, plenty of doctors, dentists.
Especially if they're going to cancel you if you're 15 minutes late, right? Or
Don't
charge you for not showing up.
Don't even get me started. And this is what my dentist is fairly new. I think he took over the dental office that I've been using, probably, maybe around the time that I wrote that batting order article, maybe about 8 years ago. So he bought and took over a thriving dental business. And I don't know, exactly what happened, if he lost some customers or gained some or what have you. But, when I first met him, we got to start talking about business, and I said, one thing that, especially dentists need to understand is that, yes, you're professional, and yes, you have the abilities and so forth to give people, the proper and best dental care. But to use the brand association's batting order, that may be 3, 4, 5 in the batting order. Here we are, and this is one thing that I explained to in a presentation to his whole staff. Is I led off with, do you know how many dentists there are in Long Beach alone? And I looked it up, and it was, a pretty significant number.
They
And
probably,
I
wow.
Yeah, and I says, "Do you know how many dentists are in Los Angeles County?" Yeah, it was a big number. I said, "Do you know how many dentists there are in Orange County?" Because we border Orange County, and I gave him that number. So in 2 counties, it was an astronomical number.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you guys are really, really good at being dentists, or really, really good at oral care and oral health,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody has a bad experience, do you think they got some other choices out there? And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, because because sometimes these dental hygienists, they're like
Right.
little Nazis, like, yo, you're not doing this,
Right.
So I give my dentist, Dr. Listio, a huge prop in that he understood even before I even even before I first spoke to him. It's like, this isn't just a dental office, it's a business. And
Mm.
he understood, it's like, if I want to pay my employees, if I want to be able to, have the type of practice that my predecessor had or better,
Mhm.
that I need to treat this like a business. And I
Right.
need to understand branding. And so we talked a lot about, he's done some things in branding, but I want to go back to reviews. Yeah,
Mhm.
he got a very bad review from somebody. I don't remember if it was on Google or Yelp or wherever it was. And he showed me the review. And he asked, basically, what should I do with this? And I said, well, because he was leaning towards, he basically said it, I always believe that, there's two stories and the truth is somewhere in between, but he
Right.
basically said the guy was off base.
Mhm.
And I believe, having read the review and also having the experience with this dentist, that he as a dentist was probably at least 80% correct. That maybe there was something that didn't happen properly, but for the
Mhm.
most part, this guy didn't quite get it, and he was being overly mean and negative for not the right reasons.
Mhm.
And dentists, like many business owners, when they see something that they think isn't true, they figure, I'll just ignore it. And
Mhm.
that is possibly the worst thing that you could do for your brand.
Right.
Because what a lot of, whether you like it or not, and maybe it's 100% false, whether you like it or not, consumers are going to look at the Yelp, they're going to look at the Google reviews, they're going to look at that. And if there's no response, if it's just there, their first thoughts are going to be probably one of two things. Either A, it's true, and
Mhm.
that's why the owner or CEO or whomever didn't respond. Or whether it's true or not, this owner is an absentee owner and doesn't care.
It's about perception, which goes back
Mhm.
to association. It's
So what I suggested to my dentist is, one, you have to acknowledge it
right.
because otherwise it's going to look bad. And number two, and I learned this from my father. My father and I disagree on a lot of things, but if he's watching this, I'll give you credit for this. He was a successful high school teacher for years and years and years, for over 40 years. And he told me about, his philosophy, because he always had well-behaved classrooms. Nobody, caused crap in his class. And he always said, one of the things is you don't let, even the smallest negative thing go. You tell them right off the bat,
Yeah.
that's not acceptable, so that they don't escalate it. And then you've got to go to great extremes to get control of your classroom back. And the other thing he said is, when somebody is acting negatively, is you pull them out of that environment. Because sometimes it's, hey, I'm the class clown, I want the teacher to react, I want everybody to say, hey, you really got under the teacher's skin. But what you do is you take them out of that environment where he or she doesn't have an audience. And he goes, come here, you and I are going to talk in the hallway. And now it's just you and me. And now that's a different environment. And I use that with Yelp and Google reviews, is that, you know what? You don't want to get into a debate online.
Right.
Yep. But what you do want to do is say, you know what? I'm really sorry you had a bad experience. That's not saying you did anything wrong. That's just acknowledging that for whatever reason, this person didn't have the experience that he or she wanted. Nothing wrong with that. I'm
Mhm.
sorry you had a bad experience at our dental office. I'm happy to give you a call. Or if you want to come in, I'm happy to speak with you and try to make this right. And
Right.
that's where it ends.
Right.
That's where it, even if somebody says something back, people will say that, see, okay, this person's trying. You don't get into a debate online. Yeah, that's never going to work for you. But if you acknowledge, not that you did anything wrong, but that they had a bad experience, and says, you know what, I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to do what I can to make this right.
and
That
let
tells
them know how they can speak with you. Yeah, whether it be
right.
a message,
That
whatever. Yeah.
that tells everybody that you know what, you care about your business, you care about your customers, clients, or members, and you're trying to make it right. And now if the person is continuing to be negative online, that person, to use my Chicago phrase, my favorite Chicago phrase, looks like a jagoff and not the owner.
Right. Right. No, I think that that is important. I know that we're getting ready to close. And so, one of the things I'll say, I mean, really to wrap it up, and you can, yeah, wrap it up. But, for brand associations, I think the key is shaping perception. And that is so much about what we spoke about today, including the reviews, because, it's that emotional connection. It's how you respond, it's acknowledgement, it's all those things. First impressions, reputation, all of that is part of shaping perception. So I think that is, and like I said, when you respond to reviews, you're shaping the perception of those that read the reviews. It's also differentiating yourself from competition. You can't be everything to everyone, and understand that. Be okay with that, but find your niche and be the best you can be in that niche for your target audience. And then finally, when you do all those things, you're going to be building trust and loyalty. And that's what everyone wants, right? That's how you're going to not lose customers. That's how you're going to gain customers. That's how you're going to get the reputation. That's how you're going to get the long lines if you're driving by and in and out. So I really think it's really brand associations. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but if I had to recap it, I would say it's about shaping perception. It's about differentiating yourself from competition, finding your niche. And then when you do those things, it's building trust and loyalty so that you don't lose customers and you gain.
Well said. And yeah, there's a lot more to dig into brand associations, but we'll do that next time.
Okay.
This has been Branding the Experience. Learn more about Bator Training and Consulting and Break Ice Marketing at www.btcinc.net/marketing.